Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Arts, English, MEG Compulsory Courses, MEG01 British Poetry, Block-1 Orientation for the Study of Poetry and the Medieval Poet Chaucer, Unit-1 from the Evaluation of Portraits towards the Explication of Poems. 1.0 Objectives. After going through this unit and the next one, you will get oriented for a study of this course. You will have a clear idea of your teacher's expectations from you on this course. And you will be able to understand the relevance of the three constituent parts of this course, i.e., the historical background of the age, the biographical account of the poet, and finally, the enjoyment and explication of the poem. Your study should finally enable you to provide insightful comments on passages selected from the 10 blocks of this course. The orientations in this and the next unit will be helpful to you in planning your study. 1.1 Introduction. On the first day at the postgraduate department of English, your poetry teacher would have given you a few tips on doing well on that course. Every subject is in a few respects different from other subjects. Hence, the methodology to be followed to master it also has to be a little different. In this unit, I will try to tell you a few general matters that you should keep in mind while doing this course. While going through the blocks, certain questions, such as given below, may crop up in your mind. What are the functions of the units on the historical background of the age? B. What is the relevance of a knowledge of the poet's life and work to the understanding of the prescribed poems? C. What should I focus my attention upon? The poems, the biographies, or the backgrounds to the periods to which the different poets belong? D. Are the frontispieces in the various blocks meant to teach me, add a facet to my understanding of the age and its poetic output, or are they just to improve the aesthetic appeal of the blocks? This course is primarily aimed at teaching you the science and art of appreciating poetry. If you pause a while on the issue of appreciation to ask yourself, what is it? It is no different from, say, appreciating a person. We can say why we like a person. How did the friends of Sita describe Ram whom they had seen in Pushpa Vatika? To quote a well-known couplet from Tulsidas the Ramcharitnamas. In the couplet above, the Sakhis tell Sita about the place where they saw Ram and Lakshman, and that they were in their youth and that they were dark and fair complexioned. Beyond that, they fail to communicate anything, as they say that the eyes that saw them had no tongue, and the tongue which can describe them had no sight. The silences in the two lines are loud. Appreciating a poem also involves providing reasons for liking a poem, or for that matter, not liking it. However, we begin by appreciating the portraits on the first and third covers. Those portraits must have evoked some feeling in you. I will tell you what I thought about them. There begins our exercise of appreciation or reading, as you will see. Finally, we end up in the next unit with a brief appreciation of John Keats on first looking into Chapman's Homer. The criteria for the appreciation of paintings and poems are different. Hence, after commenting upon two portraits, we turn towards two of the most important criteria. 111. Evaluating a poem. In the units on this course, we try to ask not so much what has been said, but why did the poet say so? And how did she convey his meaning? We try to identify some of the possible answers of the second question in the next unit. Explication of poems in this course will answer the third question. In the next unit, however, we formally discuss prosody, which is a distinctive feature of poetic language. The general features of language and literature have been discussed in the courses on aspects of language and literary criticism. Both these courses, however, will help your own reading of poems on this course. However, you need not wait until you have read those two courses. 1.2 Examining two portraits. In this block there are two cover illustrations, one on the first cover page, another on the third. Both WKRE done by the same artist. Did you notice that they represent two divergent attitudes, two disparate ways of life? Many of my friends thought that the woman with a string instrument was Saraswati, the goddess of learning. This lady is not sitting on the back of a swan. She has only two hands, whereas the goddess has four hands, and apart from the veena in the two, she holds a book and a lotus flower in the other two hands. The lady on the first cover is like a common human being in that she has just two hands. Why then did so many of my friends think that the lady on the first cover is Saraswati? Wasn't it because our observations are often loaded or informed by theory, as you might like to say? Through this course we seek to reorient your affective facilities. 12.1 Expose. So many of my friends thought that the lady on the first cover page is Saraswati because they brought to their appreciation of the portrait their prejudices, standards of evaluation unawares. This is what we do when we see a picture, or read a poem, a short story, or a novel. One of the functions of this course is to prepare you to appreciate British poetry. For, in reading a book or appreciating a piece of art, we are like travelers in a distant land. We can find only so much understanding and worth in it as we carry there. We must infer much rote immersion and supply chasms in the record. The history of the universe is symptomatic and life is mnemonical. If the course is meant, you may ask, to enhance your ability to appreciate British culture, poetry in particular, why did we not use British portraits for the cover? 2. Make a point. Howsoever deep your understanding of British culture, you as an Indian will eventually evaluate these poems by your taste, your understanding and ability to appreciate art in general. The appeal of the two cover illustrations, no matter how much they may be rooted in certain events or traditions, is ultimately universal. 1.2 Point to the shepherd. Let's begin with the portrait of the shepherd on the third cover page. Ketki told me that the man in her portrait is Godo Pehen, whom she met in Pandra village of Ratu Road on the outskirts of Ranchi. However, the man in the sketch reminded me of a host of poets. The first English poet Zedman, F.L. 670 AD, was a shepherd. II lived at the monastery of Abbess Hilda at Whitby. We get an account of his life from Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, which was originally written in Latin. Cadmole has often been called the Anglo-Saxon Milton, the greatest work attributed to him. The so-called paraphrase was discovered in the 17th century. It is, however, a work of many hands. Do you know how C. Sedman is believed to have begun writing poetry? Cadman, according to Bede, was an unlearned herdsman. So ignorant of singing was he that sometimes, at feast, where it was a custom that for the pleasure of all each guest should sing in turn, he would rise from the table when he saw the harp coming to him and go home ashamed. Now it happened once that he did this thing at a certain festivity, and went to the stable to care for the horses, this duty being assigned to him for the night. As he slept at the usual time, one stood by him saying, "Cadman, sing me something." "I cannot sing," he answered, "and that is why I came hither from the feast." But he who spoke to him said again, "Cadman, sing to me." And he said, "What shall I sing?" And he said, "Sing the beginning of created things." Cadman sang, and the next day when he told the steward of the abbey about his song, He took him to Abbess Hilda, who heard from him his episodes. Later, more episodes from the Latin Bible were explained to him, and he turned them into song. Godot Pehen is not a herdsman for any monastery. However, he is a farmer like William Langlands, 11332-1339, Piers, the ploughman. However, Godot Palan is a man of our times. He receives no visitation from the heavens as Piers does. Piers is confident, Godot is not. Piers is angry but hopeful. Godot has a cheerless prospect before him. Perhaps Godot Pehen is more like Robert Bums, 1795 to 1996, who in Henry Mackenzie's words was a heaven-taught ploughman. Burns Wordsworth thought, walked in glory and in joy, following his plough along the mountain side. We are not aware of Burns's glory and joy, son of a poor tenant farmer as he was. His father, who gave him a good education for his station, died when he was 25 years old. Finding it difficult to support the large family and to escape the life of a laborer, he intended to emigrate to Jamaica. Looking at Godot Pehen's portrait, I was reminded of Bum's Old Man in Man Was Made to Mourn, a dirge, August 1785. The sun that overhangs yon moors, outspreading far and wide, where hundreds labor to support a haughty lordling's pride. I have seen yon weary winter sun twice 40 times return, and every time has added proofs that man was made to mourn. The old man in the poem was 80 years old. Burns himself lived not even for 40 years. His life of toil and labor taught him the unity of mankind, particularly of the economically depressed sections of the society. He supported the French Revolution, especially in its early phase, and wrote, for a that, and a that. It's coming yet for a that. That man to man, the world o'er, shall brothers be for a that. Born in a strongly Calvinistic society, even Burns's father William Burns had rejected it in favor of the humanist virtues of kindness and tolerance. Burns questioned nature's laws that made men high and lowly and ordered their estate. I.J. asked, if I'm designed yon lordling's slave, by nature's law designed, why was an independent wish here planted in my mind? If not, why am I subject to his cruelty and scorn? Or why has man the will and power to make his fellow mourn? No answer, though the question is significant. Burns strove for the fraternity of all mankind, and he also wished to see humankind in harmony with nature. When his cruel coulter, cutting blade of the plough, passed through our IGNOU's cell, he empathized with it as with a comrade. I am truly sorry man's dominion has broken nature's social union, and justifies that ill opinion which makes thee startle at me, thy poor earthborn companion and fellow mortal. Godot Pehen, surrounded by his sheep while a drop trickles down his cheek, enjoys nature's social union. He is one with nature, the mother of our vegetable life. Godot Pehen reminded me also o I Thoreau, 1817 to 1862, who, though a man or nature, was also a revolutionary no matter how passive, and a distant guru of Gandhiji. However, Thoreau was an intellectual one which Godot is not. Godot's wise passiveness is like Emerson's 1803-1882 or Wordsworth's 1770-1850 and reminds us of quite a few of the latter's characters. Simon Lee, who had once been a retainer to an aristocratic family, has a long blue livery coat That's fair behind and fair before. But he is poor and 80 years old. In his youth, he was a runner at game for his master of Ivor Hall in the Shire of Cardigan. On one of his errands, he lost his right eye. Wordsworth tells us that he helped the lees cut the root of an old tree as they were too weak for any arduous work. Cyrano returned the poet's help with thanks and praises on his lips and tears in his eyes, which Inade Wordsworth recalled lie different attitude of better men. I have heard of hearts unkind, kind deeds, with coldness yet returning. Alas, the gratitude of men hasty often left me mourning. These words remind us of bumps man was made to move him. The soldier Wordsworth met one night on the road between Netherstowey and Alfoxden had been discharged on landing after his return AFI on one West Indies where 40,000 of the British troops had died of yellow fever. This discharged soldier must have been able-bodied ones. His legs were long, so long and shapeless that I looked at them, forgetful of the body they sustained. II was still in his uniform trying to reach Lyne although he had landed 10 days ago. However, he could not sleep, harassed by the dogs, as he had been. Wordsworth found him a place to spend the night. Able-bodied somewhat like Zeno Lee and the discharged soldier in their better days was the man with the sheep Wordsworth met weeping on the road in the village Halford near Alfoxden. Wordsworth narrates his story in The Last of the Flock. Me was not a victim of another's curse such as Harry Gill of Goody Blake but of his own indulgence. Godot Pehen, strong as he appears, is rather like Michael than the leech gatherer in resolution and independence, rather like the peddler in the poem of that title and the narrator in the ruined cottage than like the old Cumberland beggar, who in Wordsworth's words is bow-bent, his eyes forever on the ground. Ill plies his weary journey, seeing still, and seldom knowing that he sees. And yet Godot's is a life in nature somewhat like Michael F. E. Shepherd. Neither gay perhaps nor cheerful, yet with objects, and with hopes. Living a life of eager industry. Godot appears to be still industrious, and leading a life in nature eeping away from the city. 1.2.3 Nature, Country, and Artistic Inspiration. Of all the Western poets it was perhaps Wordsworth alone who retreated from the city to the country and as he came from the Lake District could formulate a philosophy of nature. Wordsworth looked upon nature as mother and nurse. In the prelude he tells us that the river Derwent made ceaseless music that composed his thoughts. That one, the fairest of all rivers, loved to blend his murmurs with my nurse's song. And, for his alder shades and rocky falls, and from his fords and shallows sent a voice that followed along my dreams. The prelude, book. Godot Pehen is not another Wordsworth, we are not sure if he is even the peddler or Michael. Nature creates no duplicate, but we cannot question the view that his humble social status does not grant us some superiority over him as we might imagine in our folly. But we, rather the powerful, are warned by Wordsworth. But deem not this man useless. Statesmen ye, who are so restless in your wisdom, ye, who have a broom still ready in your hands, to rid the world of nuisances, ye proud hearts swollen, while in your pride ye contemplate your talents, power, or wisdom, deem him not a burthen of the earth, is how Wordsworth values a beggar. The shepherd, the farmer, and the laborer contribute no less to the well-being of the society than the scholar, the politician, or the civil servant. A true philosopher is also a poet at heart and divorced from good. Neither science, philosophy, poetry nor even society can survive. 'Tis nature's law. Wrote Wordsworth, that none, the meanest of created things, should exist one, divorced from good. In one of his sonnets Wordsworth admitted that he was oppressed. O think that now our life is only dressed, F. show, mean handiwork, of craftsman, cook, our groom. The wealthiest man, Wordsworth went on, among us, is the best. Plain living and high thinking are no more. Wealth perhaps is not so bad as the idolatry of wealth. Whatever Ketki wanted to state through her portrait of Godot Pehen we know not. But looking through her eyes we can see the gloom of the gloom which she saw in the cheerless landscape. The intention behind having Godot Pehen on the third cover page was to remind every student of poetry of Wordsworth's views. One impulse from a vernal wood may teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good, than all the sages can. How many of the great men did not live in a crowd, Chanakya, who pulled down the Nanda dynasty of Patliputra and installed Chandragupta Maurya in his place, lived away from the crowd, not to speak of Balmiki and Vyasa and the seers of the Vedas and the Upanishads, Gandhi of Wardha and Sabarmati, who pulled down the British Empire, over which it claimed the sun did not set, lived away from the crowd. In the morning, solitude, said Pythagoras, that nature may speak to the imagination, as she does never in company, wrote Emerson. However, Emerson also cites Hobbe's views in the same essay on culture with approval. In the country, in long time, for want of good conversation, one's understanding and invention gone back to moss on them, like an old paling in an orchard. Cities give us collision. 'Tis said, London and New York take the nonsense out of a man. Emerson went on. The best bribe which London offers today to the imagination is that, in such a vast variety of people and conditions, one can believe there is room for persons of romantic character to exist, and that the poet, the mystic, and the hero may hope to confront their counterparts. The country is a creation of a few human beings, the city of generations of men and women who are willing to match their intelligence to industry, and it is there that the finest of humankind congregate to take and to give, to improve others, and in turn to be improved by them in all the infinite dimensions of our life. A lot of praise of the country has come from men and women reacting against some of the unpleasant aspects of the city: crowdedness, noise, dust and smoke, lack of solitude, and above all blind ambitions of fellow men and women. In one of his Epods, the Latin poet Horace, 65-8b, c. praises the country as against the city. The praise, however, has come from the lips of a money lender who professedly wants to leave the city and go to the village. For this reason, he calls back his loans. However, a few weeks after the loans have come back with interest, he decides once again to join the money market. The city and the rich culture it sustains are not to be decried. Anjali, or Angelica as we may call the woman with the string instrument, has the composure of a Godot Pehen, but she has something more: cultivation and culture, which are products of urban social intercourse. 1.2.4 The woman holding a string instrument. The symbolic figure of a woman holding a string instrument on the first cover is a copy by Ketki of a 16th century Mughal painting now at Musée Guimet in Paris. You may have noticed that she is not standing on the carpet or in a garden. She mounts a mask of a man with heavy features and sullen appearance. In order to enhance the ferocity of the soldier, he has been provided with 2 sharp canine teeth, or tusks, outgrowing his mouth. The countenance of the male suggests a strong influence of the Gujarat school of art. The foundations of Mughal school of art, we can say, were laid by Humayun, 1530. 1556, who unexpectedly had to be a semi-permanent guest, 1540 to 1545, of the Shah Tahmasp of Persia. However, the Shah was a religious bigot who increasingly got disinterested in the art of painting, owing to which Humayun could bring to great masters Mir Sayyid Ali of Tabriz and Abdussamad of Shiraz along with him to India. They in course of time recruited a large number of talented painters and established a flourishing atelier. Two of the early works of this studio were the illustrations in the manuscripts called Dastanayamir Hamjan, better known as the Tutinama, the story of a parrot illustrated for the divergence of the young emperor Akbar, 1554 to 1605, who could not read. The soldiers, depicted in these manuscripts, unlike those of the Gujarat school, have small eyes, long face, and flat nose which suggest Mongoloid influence.
If the mask suggests the influence of indigenous traditions, the influence of European art on the lady is unmistakable. This can be appreciated by contrasting Anjali with another but typical portrait of a young lady beneath a tree, page 17. This was done probably for Prince Dara Shikoh, 1614-1659, around 1635. A typical Mughal painting would show the body line of the lady notwithstanding the dress cover. The folds of Anjali's dress, as well as her pose, suggest Western influence. This is not surprising in view of the fact that the West began to influence medieval Indian painting since 1580 when the Jesuit mission from Goa under Rodolphe Acquaviva Naples came to the court of Akbar. At his invitation to Fatehpur Sib, Acquaviva brought Akbar a copy of the Royal Polyglot Bible of Philip I of Spain. Each of the 8 volumes of this Bible had a frontispiece engraving which Akbar asked his artists to copy. The fathers also presented the Emperor European prints and engravings of Christian subject matter which were much appreciated in the royal family, especially by Prince Salian. There is a painting of Jahangir by Payag, c. 1650, which shows a motley assortment of European paintings, some secular, some religious, above him. In another portrait of the emperor he shares a window with Jesus Christ with the cross below and him above holding the globe in his left hand and his necklace of pearl in his right. Jahangir's interest in European paintings is attested by Femão Berrio, the Portuguese Jesuit priest, who found enormous frescoes on Christ in Majesty, the Madonna, Saint Luke, scenes from the Acts of the Apostles and lives of Saints Annie and Susanna done by Indian artists at the court in Agra. Although there must have been many who learned from the West, Basavan has been considered THC most important painter in the Royal Atelier who studied and incorporated interesting details from European paintings. His study of Majnun with the emaciated horse has become a showcase example of Basavan's understanding of the spirit of European art. Surprisingly, of all the European painters, the one who influenced Mughal painting most was the German painter and engraver Albrecht Dürer, 147-1528. Dürer's famous engravings, however, fascinated British poets and writers also. These are Night, Deals and Devil, 1-5-1-3, and Melancholia, I-5-14. James Thomson, 1-834-82, described Melancholia in The City of Dreadful Night, and John Ruskin, 1-8-1-9-1-900, compared him in his Modern Painters, 1834, with Salvator Rosa, 1-615-73. Thoinas Mann, 1-875-1955, the German novelist draws much of his imagery in Dr. Faustus from Dürer's works. Dürer was the son of a Hungarian goldsmith who had settled in Nuremberg. Dürer came under the influence of the great humanist scholar Willibald Pichala, who stimulated his interest in the new learning of the Renaissance. Dürer made 2 trips to Italy and introduced the Renaissance ideals of Italy to the north. However, it was through the Italians that Dürer's paintings found entry into the Mughal courts. For we know that along with the traders and missionaries also came goldsmiths, craftsmen and doctors from Milan and Florence. Presumably the Italian presence favored the Italian works of art, which made Sir Thomas Roe the ambassador of James I at Jahangir's court from 1615 to 1619 to write back home to send works of art, like those rich paintings that come from Italy over land and by way of Ormuz. The name of the Mughal painter of the Madonna Z and Child from the etching made by Dura in 1513, now in Windsor Castle, is not known. It dates from c. 1600. However, we know that Abu III Hassan copied Dira's Saint Jolison of the Cross in the year 1600 when he was 12 years old. Abu I Hassan, son of Akka Riza, was born in the Mughal household and grew in the presence of Prince Salim's shadow. Hassan was undoubtedly a great artist. So was Kesav Das, whose copy of St. Matthew, now in the Bodleian Library, Oxford, remains a proof of the Western influence on Mughal painting. Anjali is an early painting, and still we find the finesse which is lacking, for instance, in Madonna and Child at Windsor Castle referred to above. So much for the Western influence evident in Anjali. The symbolism of standing on somebody in order to express the subjugation of that person or what he signifies can be traced back to the Shiva iconography of South India. Shiva, in his famous dance, stands on a dwarf who in turn symbolizes meanness, pettiness, jealousy, cowardice, etc. The UIL-known Mughal artist who did the original of Anjali apparently picked up and elaborated upon the motif symbolically. The same symbolism was made use of by Abul I Hassan, who in one of his paintings of c. 1620 depicts Jahangir best riding the globe, page 18. He embraces the Shah Abbas of Persia but incidentally pushes him into the Mediterranean. While the cherubs holding the crescent moon are Islamic and Western, the halo around Jahangir is a typical feature of late Jahangiri portraits when the actual power of the government had shifted from the emperor to the queen. In contrast with this portrait, there is economy and artistic expressiveness in Anjali, typical in their different ways of Western art and the illustrations of Akbar's reign. 1.2.5 Resume. There are critics who think that the greatness of an artistic creation lies in its richness, ambiguity, and interpretability, and that it is both futile and somehow wrong to search for the correct interpretation, the one which the author intended, wrote E.H. Gombrich in his essay, The Evidence of Images, and went on to affirm, I do not hold this view. I do not believe that any interpretation is sure and infallible, any more than any other hypothesis can be. But I do think that we can try as historians to restore the original context in which these words were intended to action, and it is always worthwhile to venture upon this perilous path. In his essay, Gombrich picks up problems of interpretation of visual images for military intelligence, ornithologists, communication scientists and art critics, and shows the centrality of interpretation to the business of living. Professor Gombrich's essay was published in 1969 by Johns Hopkins University Press in a volume edited by Charles Singleton called Interpretations, Theory and Practice. However, you may think that interpretation is a Western fad and a byproduct of scientism. Let's allude to two episodes in Sanskrit literature. This first one is from Kalidasa's Sakuntala. King Dushyanta, as you know, lost his lady love due to a curse. While the king was once looking at a painting with three women, Vidusaka comes in and the king asks him who according to him is Sakuntala. Vidusaka replies, she who is leaning rather wearily against the mango tree, its leaves glistening with the water she has thrown over it. She extends her arm with infinite grace, her face is slightly flushed with the heat, and FL pies entwine her streaming hair to fall together over her shoulders. This first one is from Kalidasa's 3H Kuntala. King Dushyanta, as you know, lost his lady love due to a curse. While the king was once looking at a painting with three women, Vidusaka comes in and the king asks him who according to him is Sakuntala. Vidusaka replies, she who is leaning rather wearily against the mango tree, its leaves glistening with the water she has thrown over it. She extends her arm with infinite grace, her face is slightly flushed with the heat, and FL pies entwine her streaming hair to fall together over her shoulders. She must be Gakuntala and the others her friends or maidservants. We can see BMFRE the portrait to a lyric which celebrates a single intense moment. The painter in Sakuntala took a single moment in higher subject's life and immortalized it with his brush just as a poet does with his pen. In his comments, Vidusaka interpreted the portrait. More interesting from the point of view of interpretation is a similar, although a little scabrous, allusion in Dandan's Dasakam T.A Eater, The Tales of the Ten Princes, written in the 7th century of the Christian era. In the city of Mathura lived a young man who frequented the abodes of courtesans. Once he chanced upon a miniature of a young lady in the hands of an artist. Struck by her beauty, the young man told the artist, "Master, I notice some contrasting features here. This soft body is of a lady of quality. Her slim figure and the pallid beauty of her features reveal her rank, but he who possesses such treasures has not enjoyed them as much as he might, for her glance is still haughty. She is not the wife of someone who goes on long journeys abroad, for her hair is not tied up in plaits, nor are there other signs to indicate an absent husband or widowhood. Here is a sign on her left side. She must be the wife of some old merchant who is not excessively endowed with virile strength. She fully merits a male of great talent to execute her portrait, as may be seen from the quality of the work." The young man's interpretation of the lady's portraits tells us not only that analysis and interpretation is not a recent Western fad but is of a piece with any civilized society, Occidental or Oriental. In other words, it is an implement for life, for civilized life. This course aims at enriching this aspect of your mind. 1.3 Summary. We have told you about the ultimate aim of this course in the preceding subsection. However, your orientation is only halfway through. Here we have discussed some of the thoughts that came to my mind on looking at the portraits on the covers. There we formally began our exercise of critical appreciation. However, we also simultaneously examined the nature of artistic inspiration and their role vis-a-vis artistic technique, the role of the reader in the milieu, mental and social, of the artist as well as the reader in the creation and reception of art. Reader response theory is relatively new in the West. Indian sages had written on K-Kratri and Bahvaitri Pratiptis hundreds of years ago. Now you may read the next unit that focuses attention on literary art, especially poetic art. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.